Hey, it's Shane with GotRom.com. This video is about a deep hip flexibility sequence that I do on a regular basis to get my hips flexible enough to do the splits. And I wanted to do kind of a follow along for you at a slow pace, where I'm also kind of explaining some of the subtler details of each of the stretches, because often the devil's in the details and some of the most valuable things that you can pick up about stretching are overlooked when you kind of just do them in a very quick format. So we're going to go a little bit slower, and I'm going to invite you to follow along. So let's get into it. The first exercise we're going to do is downward dog from yoga. We're going to stretch our hamstrings and our calves. So assume a push-up position, and then press your butt up to the sky. Keep your legs straight, arms straight, head between the arms. I like to start by pedaling my feet back and forth. Experiment with wider feet, narrower feet. Bend one leg, bend the other, kind of pedal it out. If I want to stretch my upper back, I would kind of arch my upper back. But if we're going after the legs, we're going to keep the stress back here. You can experiment with different variations that feel good for your body. But this is just kind of a calf and hamstring warm-up. The next exercise that we'll go into is your basic forward fold in yoga. So you'll walk your feet forward, lift up, exhale, go down. Lift and lengthen your spine, come back down. I'm also subtly contracting my quads on this side. This is an overlooked area. People just think you just flop into this position, but I'm actually pulling myself into position. And I like ballistic stretching in this position, so I turn my hands down, I flex my quads, and I pull myself deeper into a stretch. Breathing and relaxing. If this feels good, you can also assume kind of a ragdoll position and either breathe and relax or continue that ballistic stretching of subtly kind of bouncing in this way. Don't do this if you're a beginner, but if you're more advanced, you can try this ballistic stretching variation. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to move into a squat. So you're going to take your hands out a little wider, bring your feet a little bit wider, and lift your chest up and drop your butt down. You can kind of wiggle around, create some space in your hips, squeeze your glutes, and then sink down into whatever is a nice deep squat for you. I like to progress the squat by either kind of leaning forward and pressing my elbows out into my knees to stretch my groin. Breathing, relaxing, maybe doing a little bit of ballistic kind of bouncing if that feels right for your body. You can also contract, relax. I'm going to squeeze my own elbows. So I'm holding my breath, squeezing my own elbows with my groin muscles, and then relax, wiggle around, creating space in my hips. From here, I immediately kind of let one leg come out to the side into a cossack squat type position. So I'll switch angles so you can see a little bit better. But I went to this position. I'm up on my toe on this side. You could be flat-footed if that feels good to you, but to start with, I'm on my toe, I'm pressing out into this knee, and this foot is flat. I'm going to turn towards this foot, reach out and grab either my ankle, or for me, I'll grab my foot, and then I'm breathing and relaxing. Where I feel this stretch is deep up in here, so that's the target, that's where you want to feel it. So you're here, breathing and relaxing. Little bounces. Wiggles, contracting, relaxing. And then I'm going to switch to the other side, reaching out. I'm flexing and releasing my quad. When I do that, it feels like it relaxes in here really well. The next stretch that we're going to move into is a standing hip flexor stretch. So I'm going to come a little bit more upright, nice long stance. I'm going to put my hands on my knee. I'm going to crunch really, really hard, and then I'm going to let my hip drop down into hip extension, and then I'm going to micro side bend. If you're not too flexible, you might find the stretch a little bit earlier, but for me, I find that I need to sink way deep into it, and then breathe and relax. I'm also doing very subtle contractions where I'm dragging my back foot into the ground for a couple seconds as I'm dragging this foot into the ground, so I'm squeezing the ground, tight, 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 relaxing, side bending, maybe dropping down to a knee if that feels good. I'm going to switch to the other side. Nice long position. I crunch so that I don't compensate by arching my back. Drop my hip down, lean to the side, breathe and relax. You really want to learn how to go by feel. Some people just go into one position and then stop and just hang out here, kind of wasting time. There's all kinds of little subtle micro adjustments that you should be making when you're stretching. For example, for me, what feels intuitive right now is to drop down to a knee and actually lift this heel, which pushes my hips into a little bit of a posterior tilt and gives me a little bit more of an effective stretch on this left side. So I'm breathing, relaxing. The next stretch is a wide angle forward fold. So we're going to come upright, toes slightly turned in. This is going to be another hamstring stretch. I'm going to lift up with a flat back and then fold forward. I like to kind of pry left and right. When I do this, I can feel which hamstring is tighter, left or right. To me, they feel pretty symmetrical today. Normally my right's a little bit tighter, but I kind of wiggle around first, or I might do some bouncing, or I might take my hands off and do some bouncing. I might also grab one side, turn my belly button towards this foot, and breathe and stretch here, or some ballistic stretching. This is really good for the lateral hamstrings. You'll have to play around with what foot position works best for you. For me, it's about here. So I'm going to get both sides. The next stretch, we're going to go back to this position, but instead of stretching our hip flexors, we're going to stretch our quads. So I'm going to reach back, grab this foot, square up to the front, pull the heel towards the butt, and then sink forward. I like to rest my shoulder on my thigh so I can reach back with both hands. If you don't have the balance for that, then you can either have this front hand on the ground or this back hand on the ground. Personally, I like having the other hand because if I use this hand, I pull my leg into external rotation on the back side, which might get a little bit more kind of inner quad or adductor, but the hip joint itself is in a closed pack position when it's internally rotated in extension. So I like to have my right hand holding my right leg and then have this hand here so that my leg stays in internal rotation in hip extension. So either I'm resting here or both hands. You can intensify this by pulling the heel closer to the butt or getting more hip extension. And we'll switch sides. Set the position, reach back. So after you've kind of stretched out the hip flexors and the quads and the hamstrings, we can go into a full front splits type position. So you're gonna I like to stretch my hip flexors in the back leg to make sure I'm as lengthened out that way as possible. Normally I'd have two blocks here to kind of hold myself, but in this case we'll just kind of go into splits here. So you find this long position. Now I'm going to contract, I'm squeezing the ground, I'm pressing down with my front heel, down with my back leg, and then when I release I'm going to lengthen up through my spine and go into splits-like position. Breathing and relaxing. You can emphasize the hamstring more, or you can emphasize the hip flexor more. Now we'll get the other side, see if we're symmetrical. So you're here. I'm lengthening my back hip flexor. And then legs straight. Tensing, pushing my heel down into the ground. Feels pretty symmetrical today. Some days it's not as symmetrical. That's the front splits. The next position is the SpiderMan stretch. So we're going to let this back leg go. and I'm going to walk my foot out a little bit wider, try to open this hip up a little bit, get a little more external rotation on it. And I'm going to drop down like Spider-Man crawling up a wall. And I'm just going to kind of wiggle around trying to create space in this hip joint. There's no wrong way to do this. You can either just go elbows or hands, or you can push away and look away. From here I like to contract, relax, so I'm going to pull my knee into myself, pulling, 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 and release. Look away. Or I might let this foot come in and kind of let it rock open a little bit. I'll show you from the front. Spider-Man position. You're here. Open this hip up with some circles. Maybe push away, look away. Contract into yourself, so I'm pulling in this way and pushing out this way at the same time. Push, pull. Or I'm here, opening up my hip in this direction. The next stretch is active pigeon, which is exactly what we're doing here, but you let your knee come all the way to the ground, and you keep your back knee off the ground. So I'm just letting my knee touch, and come back up, touch, come back up, from the side, touch, up, opening up the hip. Now that our hips are opening up into external rotation, I like to drop into the full pigeon pose and scoop my hand underneath and twist and let my shoulder drop to the ground. I also have to flex my foot here into the ground to kind of stick it into place. So I'm twisting, dropping the shoulder, my foot is pressing into the ground. Breathe. When I relax, drop a little lower. Feel a big stretch in the glutes here. Sometimes I like to have both hands and push deeper into the twist. You should feel no strain or stress on your knee at all. It should all be deep in kind of the glutes. I'll show you from the front and the other leg. You can switch sides if you're following along at home. So you go back leg off the ground, doing your active pigeon, and then you come down to full pigeon, twist underneath here, this foot flexes down into the ground, twist and drop your shoulder. This little subtle thing that I did with my hand here, I'm twisting my thigh out even more to exaggerate the external rotation. That felt what my body needed. So I'm twisting with one hand, reaching with the other. The next exercise from here is the double pigeon. So I'm going to come back more upright. I'm going to have kind of an open angle here. I'm not going to be very closed down. There's got to be some space, not 90 degrees, but just some space between my thigh and my shin. So got some space here. Bring this other leg across on top. Now we're getting an exaggerated external rotation on both sides. So I'm going to sit back, make sure that my knee is firmly on the ground, make sure both my toes are cocked up towards the knee. The feet are dorsiflexed. That protects the knee joint. And then I'm going to slowly lean forward, maybe rock my way into position. When I feel like I come to my end range, I breathe, relax, breathe, and relax. I like little bounces here, only if you feel very, very comfortable. No stress whatsoever on my knees. It's just all this upper glute is getting most of the stretch here. So I'm here. To intensify it, you could go hands here. And breathing, and that little bounce just pushes me just a hair deeper into the stretch. My feet are cocked up the whole time. This is a very active pose, as are most stretches. And then I'm going to switch other side. Go here, hook this across, cock the toes up, sit tall, lean forward. You're kind of stacking ankle joint on top of knee or just above the knee. And then lean forward. Little bounces. No stress on your knee whatsoever, just all on this lateral hip. So this is double pigeon. This is a lot of hip external rotation on both sides. Now we're moving into kind of the full splits. If you aren't already close to your full splits, you probably want to extend this stretching routine out a few more minutes, but because you're advanced, we're going to go right to the middle splits type position. Now don't worry if you go and you start and this is all you're doing. What we're doing is building strength and some length in this position. I find that most people have to kind of lean forward a little bit in the beginning. So go to kind of your end range here, and then I want you to really exaggeratedly with both legs squeeze the ground, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Put your hands on your thigh and come upright. Squeezing, this is a big strength exercise. And then you're going to alternate squeezing with relaxing, deeper into it. If you want to really intensify it, you take your hands off. You can kind of sit all the way back into a straddle position. You can move into your pancakes, or if you want more time in the middle splits position, you could come more upright. So whatever feels right for you. This is active middle splits. The other position is pancake is the next one. So you're going to sit back, probably stick your butt back farther, and then either point your toes if that feels better, or cock your toes up. I like to do both actually. And then you're going to lean forward, breathe, relax. I like to flex and release my quads here. Every time I release my quads, it feels like this inner hamstring relaxes really well. So I'm here, breathing and relaxing. I like to kind of wiggle side to side and go a little lower. I also like to go kind of hands on my forehead and bounce. That feels effective. You can raise and lower. All viable options to build strength and length. Or you can just kind of hold your end range, chest to ground or belly button to ground. After all that intense split stretching, I like to kind of do a little bit of a activation or strengthening pose to end to kind of teach your muscles, oh yeah, you gotta contract as well as lengthen. So I'm gonna come up to a squat position, and I'm going to lift up and lower, kind of in my mid-range, not rock bottom and not all the way up. And this kind of fires the glutes and makes everything turn back on. Maybe play with different stances and see what's comfortable. But I'm gonna raise up, hold it, and lower. I'm gonna do that a couple times. Raise and lower. You could take it out wider into like a horse stance type position if you wanted. But we're just trying to turn muscles back on, because after you do the splits-like positions, often the muscles freak out a little bit. So give that hip flexibility sequence a shot. Let me know which one was your favorite in the comments below, and see you in the next video.
Yeah.